The National Workforce Plan lays out 3 key tests, which I think are very useful. The 3 A's, if you've got to know them. In any workforce plan that's set out at national, regional or board level, we need to apply these 3 tests. One is around affordability. You go out and ask all the people in the wards and theatres, or in a care home, no doubt, or on social work team, they all say to you, we need more staff. And you could quite easily double the number of NHS employees by following that process. I'm sure you could do the same. The reality is, it's got to be an affordable workforce. We have to be able to balance the books at the end of the year. And it's about the workforce we can afford within our cash envelope, but sometimes we have to operate within. Availability, increasingly, well, if you go back 5 to 10 years, the workforce planning at NHS was work out how many you need and put an advert in the Scotsman and the Nursing Times. If you didn't get enough people, put in bigger adverts. And that was really the way of thinking around it. And of course, there was a plentiful supply of people that wanted to come and work in many of our services. Increasingly, that's not going to be the case. Both in the South East, for the reasons I described earlier on. But when you begin to look at the demographics and some of the projections, there aren't going to be enough people in certain components of our workforce that we're going to be able to go out and recruit. So we need to make sure that what we're forecasting we need is actually going to be available in the labour market. And also our workforce plans to reflect adaptability. So there's no point in saying we're going to shift this workforce and get them to work over there. We're not going to take people out of a big acute hospital and move them into the community. Can we do that? Can we train them? Can we give them skills and competencies to operate in a very different setting? And if we can't, then again we need to revise our workforce plans. Regional workforce plans, again, look at a number of issues, and in particular, what they pick out are some of the regional services that we jointly plan and deliver sometimes on a regional basis. We also try and pick out some joint working arrangements, and we're busy trying to develop regional infrastructures, one of which is a bit like what we're doing today around education. So again, just some detail. Regional workforce planning, some of the joint working we're doing is around modernising medical careers. And the reason we do that jointly on a regional basis is because we have a South East Deanery that organises and manages medical training and education based in Edinburgh, which covers Fife and the borders as well. So we're working hard with our educational colleagues to make sure that new training arrangements for junior doctors are in place. And I can reassure you here that there will be more junior doctors on the ground on the 1st of August this year than there were at the 1st of August last year. So unlike some of the situation scenarios you've seen described in England and Wales about large swathes of unemployed junior doctors, in Scotland that we've adopted a very different approach. We will actually be employing more coming 1st of August. The numbers will decline gradually and in a managed way thereafter. But there will no collapse of services on the 1st of August, as you see some from the headlines in the papers. SNP is a student nurse intake project I was describing earlier on about forecasting nursing numbers on a regional basis. We're working together on things like HR information systems to try and improve the quality of the data around the workforce. Again, you've seen headlines in the papers, particularly through Audit Commission work around using nurse bank and nurse agency staff. Again, we're working on a joint basis regionally to try and minimise that, particularly the agency costs, which were going through the roof, which were very expensive and not the best use of funding. And we've actually managed to pull a lot of that back and use bank staff, who are in effect NHS employees, but operate on a more flexible basis. And new advancing roles, trying to develop regionally new roles that we're going to take us into the future. And Janet Corcoran, one of my colleagues from NHS, is in the audience today, who's the expert on that, and we'll be able to discuss any of the details about some of the new roles we're developing in the NHS with you today. We're also working hard, like you, particularly around education development, to develop infrastructures on a regional basis to share things like learning and development. And I picked out some of the other issues around that earlier on. The SAS, by the way, is the ambulance service. Don't get too concerned about military connections. And there's a range of services that we actually try and plan on a regional basis. I'm not going to run through them. Some are small, some are quite significant, quite large, some have an impact on some of the services you provide as well. Board workforce plans are governed by this thing called an HDL, Health Department letter. And again, it defines what's just the demand side that I talked about earlier on, some of the staff projections. Consultants by specialty, nurses by category, AHPs by discipline. How many we're going to need now, how many we're going to need in the future. For doctors, they would like us to be able to tell them how many they think we're going to need in 10 years' time, which is quite interesting. Scottish State want to know that because they commission undergraduate training programmes. And to train a doctor, it takes 10 years or beyond that. So that's why they'd like to know. The problem for boards is, well, what's going to happen in terms of technology, vaccines, genetics. 10 years ago, we were training lots of cardiac surgeons. You know, the people who see in Hallway City that open their chest and do this really radical work. Nowadays, you know, a lot of that work is done in other ways, through drugs and through non-invasive or day case surgery using a whole variety of techniques. We actually have too many cardiac surgeons now. And it's very difficult to train to do something else in a cardiac surgeon when you think about it. So it is difficult. These are some of the issues we puzzle with. The range and the depth of plans. The workforce is huge, a lot of very specialist roles. How can you possibly try and encompass all that in a plan? The data I talked about is not perfect. Impact on what we call here, say, agenda for change. Huge issues around the new pay systems and how that's going to change relativities between jobs. Will that change how people perceive jobs? Will we have different supply and demand issues in some of those jobs? We find it quite difficult to do projections beyond 3 to 5 years, to be perfectly honest. The 10-year one is very, very difficult to actually try and do for doctors and dentists. And trying to match this bottom-up, top-down workforce planning process is very difficult. How do you align things like working time directives with the need to deliver services locally, with having a shortage of a particular group of staff on the ground in a particular region or board area? Applying the 3 tests is very important, and it's actually a very good discipline to get into. But again, trying to check the affordability of 5-year plans with our finance colleagues can be quite a difficult task at times. And you have to learn to use their language, because they find it very difficult to talk our language. So dealing with people like finance colleagues is absolutely critical. We are still implementing our pay modernisation agenda. We're still going through the implementation agenda for change, which affects something like 80–90% of our workforce. And until we begin to see that coming through, we're not entirely clear what some of the impacts will be in practical terms. So boards are getting better at a lot of these issues, but these are some of the real big issues that they're struggling with at the moment in terms of workforce planning, and that's a strategic context. Just some challenges, just to sort of try and think about that. And you'll have your own set of challenges, so you can take out my ones and put your own list. But we have pressures to increase our workforce numbers and pressures to decrease our numbers. So for instance, you know, some of the financial pressures we anticipate in the next few years might begin to make us look at no increase or even a rejigging of our skill mix in terms of our workforce. But on the other hand, Building for Health says we should be delivering services as local as possible. The more local you deliver services, that's a huge workforce impact. Centralise only when necessary. That's a real conundrum to try and get around. So our workforce planners and management teams are puzzling with how do you bring all these competing pressures and demands together. It's a very challenging agenda. You know, people sometimes pick me up at this one and say, huge workforce and payroll rises. Well, you've seen the press around how the huge increases in GPs, for example, and you've heard the debates on TV and radio about whether they're real or not. Bottom line is, we have spent an awful lot of money in terms of improving the pay of doctors, dentists, and actually the rest of the staff in the NHS. So we need to actually begin to recover some of the return for that investment.